Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara, and I am thrilled that you are joining us today. I love the community we have developed together through this show, and I'm committed to continuing to give a platform for voices and stories to be shared. When we allow others and ourselves to feel seen and heard, we create much needed change in this industry and in this world. So thank you for supporting this community. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and let's get started. I'm very excited to chat with our guest today. She's an accomplished psychiatrist, a former violinist, and is passionate about the intersection of both in her line of work. She adopts an integrative approach to her care, emphasizing the importance of mindfulness, exercise, diet, and lifestyle, all things we love very much on this podcast. Her story is both a cautionary tale for young musicians, as well as an example of hope and the realization that we do have free will to choose our lives. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Esther Kim to The Conscious Artist. Esther, I'm so happy you're joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. I said cautionary tale to describe your journey only to highlight the fact that so many of us have struggled with and still struggle with identity crises, perfectionism, burnout, etc. And especially for young musicians, it can feel like the end of the world if we don't place first in a competition or we don't win an audition or somebody doesn't like our playing. And I admire so much your sort of rerouting to psychiatry when you realized that a career in music was not quite what you wanted. Not only because I'm always in awe of talented people that excel in multiple disciplines, but also for your courage to change course. Because I think being able to say, hey, you know what? This isn't working for me. I'm going to look for something that works better for me takes a lot of courage. So I'm really excited to chat with you today. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, could we start from the beginning? What was your journey into music?
So I started violin when I was 4 or 5 years old. I actually don't remember anything specific about it. I just remember I guess came to this world and then I had a violin in my hand. I was very young and I played for, gosh, I didn't really have any agenda when when I first started off. I just playing for fun. I really loved it. I liked making sounds and I liked just playing melodies and it was just a really fun thing for me. I started getting a little bit more serious a couple years later. I was studying in California, where I'm from, in LA, and then my parents had wanted me to audition for Juilliard pre-college. So I ended up auditioning when I think I was about 9 or 10 years old. Prior to that, I had, for the first time, went to Aspen Music Festival. I was one of the youngest students there, and I had studied with Miss DeLay in Aspen and Miss Tanaka, and they had, asked me to audition for Juilliard pre-college that year. So I did, and got in and was at pre-college for about 4 years. And then after that, around age 13 or 14, I did the Yehudi Menuhin competition and I met one of the jury members there, Michael Frischenschlager, who was teaching at the University of Vienna at the time. And he had asked me to come study with him during the summertime in Mozarteum in Salzburg. And I just really fell in love with his teaching. And so then after that, I had decided to go to the University of Vienna for performing arts around age 15, 14 or 15, and studied with him for about 3 or 4 years. And then after that, I went to Indiana University, where I first started with my artist diploma under Jamie Laredo, who's now at Cleveland Institute of Music, but previously had been at Indiana University after he had left Curtis. And then when Jamie Laredo had left Indiana, I then switched studios to Maurizio Fuchs, and I was studying with him for about a couple of years. So at that time, I had been doing competitions, preparing for competitions. And then it was, I guess, in my early to mid 20s that I questioned whether this was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so that was kind of a time of self-exploration, and I didn't really know what burnout was. I think that we don't really talk about it a lot in the classical music world. We usually think of burnout as like corporate America and your corporate American job, and you like clock in and clock out and you sit at an office desk. But it's often a word that we kind of throw around a lot. But I think in music, it's very misunderstood. And it's in music, it sometimes burnout can just be much more subtle and you don't even notice it at first. But what I started noticing is that I just stopped really feeling things as much. I felt like the liveliness I started to miss that, and it just seemed more like a task. And also my goals weren't. I didn't really feel like they were really aligned with the original goals of why I fell in love with music. So at that point, I was trying to figure out what this feeling was. And that's, Mr. Fuchs, he was amazing. He actually probably recognized this a lot earlier than I did, but he never really told me directly. He would just tell me like, I think it's good to take a day of rest. Just don't practice. Just go for a walk and think about life and think about what you want to do. And I remember I was sort of on just this like, no, it was like I was on a treadmill that never ended with the competitions. And I had submitted my application for Hanover and was selected to compete. And I told him, and he was like, let's just think about this, because I think he could see that I was just sort of going with the motions and not really passionate about it, just doing it just because that's what you're supposed to do. So at that point, I had just randomly decided to take a biology class in Indiana University, and it wasn't even like a biology class for majors. It was like the pre-majors biology course where they were like, this is an atom. And my mind was blown because my entire life was just like music and didn't really explore anything else because, you're always like in a conservatory, and you don't really have the opportunity or the time to really study other subjects in much depth. So after that, I was absolutely like in awe with science and biology. And I remember going up to this biology teacher, and she must have thought I was so strange because I was like, oh my gosh, this is an atom. This is amazing. And she was like, okay, that's great. And then after that, like I would sit in the front row taking handwritten notes and just like looking all eager beaver. And that sort of was that was like the first step that I took before I decided to eventually go to medical school and become a doctor.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay, so many things to unpack here, and I have so many questions. I'm going to try and go in order. Firstly, going to pre college Juilliard at a young age. Both had conservatory training. I didn't go in pre college, but I went to college. Was there as much toxicity as we see at college level in conservatories? Was there as much toxicity in pre college, sort of this cutthroat competition of like survival of the fittest? Did that contribute in any way to the eventual feelings of, maybe this isn't for me?
Yes, I think that when you're young, I mean, for me, I was like, maybe 10 years old. You don't really understand what's going on. You just are placed on the treadmill and you just keep going and going and going. It is definitely a very high pressure space. I mean, I think it's not just a pre-college or college, it's probably in a lot of conservatories. It's intense. I think that oftentimes the danger is that there's also this like unspoken competition among parents, the pre-college parents. And I remember hearing stories about and actually meeting some other kids there, and they would tell me that they moved all the way from home, maybe Korea, Japan, or China, and they were living in New York City with just their mom and their siblings and their dad. They were all back home, and it's hard, when you're a little kid and you just sort of pack up and leave. I think that can be a lot of pressure.
But you did that, right?
Sort of. I actually was living in LA. We did something really wild where my mom and I would fly every weekend from LA.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we took a red eye every weekend.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so when I first started out, I remember we took like this 11:59 JetBlue red eye, and we would arrive around like 7 or 8 with the time difference at JFK. And then from JFK, we would drive straight to Juilliard. And first thing I would do is to orchestra rehearsal. And then I would have the entire day of pre-college all the way until 7 p.m. Honestly, I like don't know how my mom did it because
Yeah.
my mom just I ask her now, I'm like, how in the world? Because I guess she must have been in her late 30s or early 40s. And yeah, she would go with me everywhere. I mean, flying back and forth every weekend. Not only that, but like I have two older siblings, so when we did fly back home to LA, she's like doing everything for them too and making sure that they have their own, like they were taking music lessons as a hobby though. But she would take them to like tutoring centers and do her mom thing.
Wow.
Yeah, we did that for a while. And then when I went to Vienna, that was even more intense because we would actually fly every month.
So you didn't move to Europe.
Well, I feel like I half lived in Vienna because I would actually eventually just fly there by myself, and I would stay there for like maybe 3 weeks on end, and then I would fly back for a week. So I was mostly in Vienna.
Okay. But by yourself at 15,
At times, yeah.
like in a totally different continent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I mean, starting off, like, of course, my mom would fly back and forth with me, and Professor Fischenschlager is amazing, and he was basically like a grandfather figure for me as well, and so I always felt like I was never alone. And his family really kind of adopted me as well, and would always welcome me there and feed me and take care of me, and they were amazing. So I never really felt alone.
Wow. I have a question that's kind of out of order because we haven't even talked about sort of the switch into psychiatry. But I'm just curious, were you ever worried about the amount of time and energy and effort your parents or your mom, I guess in particular, put in to help you pursue music? And did you like ever worry about disappointing them or feel guilty for letting music go?
Ooh, yes, that is a great question because I later on, when I decided that I wanted to explore other things, it was probably one of the hardest discussions that I had ever had with my parents.
Wow.
What's ironic about it all is that my dad's actually a doctor. So, Korean American family, my parents were both born in Korea. My dad came to the States and he did his residency at USC. He's an immigrant and he's a doctor, and so you would think that the stereotype is like
They
they
would
want.
want you to be doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like one of the hardest conversations that I've had, particularly with my dad, my mom was a little bit more like, eventually she just wanted me to be happy and pursue whatever I wanted to pursue. But my dad was a little bit tougher because I remember when I first told him, he was like, excuse me, like, how much effort went into this and you've already gone so far. It's like, why would you be throwing it all away? And then I think I had to sort of help him also reframe because in my mind when I was making this switch, I was like, oh, am I actually throwing everything? Am I like just throwing all that time away that I dedicated to music? And I sort of had to reframe it like, no, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just adding another layer to my identity. I'm not betraying music. Music is a part of my identity, and there could be other things that are part of my identity as well. So yeah, that was a pretty tough conversation with my dad. He was not happy with the decision, but eventually he turned around. He was like, wow, that was like the best decision that you ever made. I'm like, thank you. It only took a couple years.
But that's so astute of you to be able to like recognize at such a young age that I don't want to limit my identity to something, especially something that isn't necessarily serving me in the way that it used to or the way that I would wish for, and I want to add to my identity. I mean, that's really, most adults are not able to separate their identity from what they do, feel worthy in their identity for who they are rather than what they do, you know?
Yeah, there's a term in psychology. It's called identity fusion.
Is that similar to identity foreclosure?
Yes, it is similar. It's
Okay.
sort of in the same realm. Identity fusion is like when your sense of self merges with a role so tightly that it's hard to separate the two. I think that, oftentimes, I mean, in my practice, I will often encounter people who become very depressed after they retire. I saw it a lot when I used to work in the geriatric unit at UCLA. Like, I remember there was this very successful LA County judge, who had been practicing for, gosh, like 50 years, and then he retired and didn't know who he was. This is like an 85-year-old man. One of the reasons why he was so depressed is because his personal identity was so intertwined with his role. I think it's similar to very serious musicians. For many musicians, that this fusion starts very young. It's like before we even know who we are outside of music, we're sort of already defined by it. I think especially in pre-college where it's a very competitive environment, high pressure, high stakes. When you're young, you don't really know who you are. Part of childhood and part of being a teenager is exploring that, exploring who you are. But for many musicians, that it starts very young.
But isn't that a common problem in society in general that we fuse our identity with what we do? For example, like it's so common in any sort of given social situation when you meet someone new. Hi, my name is so and so. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a banker. Oh, I am a doctor. Oh, I'm a lawyer. Oh, I'm a like that we say I am this, but that's not who we are. That's what we do. It's harder to separate those things as a musician because a lot of musicians, like, yes, I say, "Hi, I'm Pallavi. I'm a pianist." But for a lot of musicians, that connection with what we do is not a job, it's a lifestyle, it's our purpose, it's our passion. It's not just a means to earn money and go to work 9 to 5. You know what I mean? So I guess, like, it's also harder because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of goes to the term that you mentioned earlier, identity foreclosure. They're really related. I think that identity foreclosure is when we don't achieve what we believe we should be achieving, and when that achievement is so tightly bound to our identity, then when we feel like we don't achieve what we want to achieve, because our sense of self is so locked into that one identity, when that identity fails, there's no backup plan, and it feels like it's just like a void. There's no scaffolding anymore. And I think that's where the danger lies. And you're right, not just in musicians, but I mean, I feel like it's, you see it in athletes as well. It's big in sports.
Sort of anything that you have to excel at from a young age, right?
Yeah, but also even like I remember when I used to work at the West LA VA, the Veterans Affairs Hospital. I often saw that in veterans too, because they would be in service for like 10 years and then try to reintegrate into civilian life. And it was like a very tough transition for them because so much of their identity was locked into being in service, being in the army or being in the Marines. But I think you're right. You also see it in like not just like musicians, but you see it in like doctors, you see it in lawyers. It's quite common. I think for musicians, though, it's even more so because you start young. Because even with like doctors, I mean, generally you don't really know that you want to be a doctor until maybe like college when you are declaring a major or you have to take your pre-medical courses. But music, you don't really decide like, hey, I want to be like a concert pianist or a concert violinist when you're in college.
No, I mean, like, I decided when I was 10.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, like, I knew
Yeah.
nothing else. I've never had a day that I wanted to do something else. Like, I've never had a day that I didn't want music in my life, and I know that's very fortunate and very lucky, and that's not at all to say that, like, I love every minute of practicing, like, by no means. But what you're saying with music, I mean, we have to sort of form this attachment to what we do at such a young, impressionable age that it leads to dependency on external validation, which can then lead to a lack of self worth. And we can then lose our identity because our life suddenly depends on the success of our career. And that success is defined by some stupid cookie cutter societal construct that doesn't even make sense for most humans. But with that can come very quickly loss of identity, burnout, fear of failure, perfectionism, all of the things that we have all struggled with at some point.
Yes, it becomes very fragile because if your whole self-worth is now wrapped up around performance, then every mistake, every rejection, every injury, it feels invasive. It feels like an attack, not just on your playing, but on your being.
Yeah. You said something earlier about burnout, and I have a question about that. When you were describing how you started to sort of lose the sparkle, it sort of became a little bit less shiny and a little bit less interesting what you were doing. And as I was hearing you describe that, is burnout not similar in that way to depression? Like, is there any element that connects them?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that burnout can definitely make someone vulnerable to depression.
Okay.
Yeah, I think about burnout in many ways, sort of, it's like when your actions have drifted from your values, like something's not aligning.
Mm,
In therapy, we talk a lot, or at least I like to talk a lot about values-based living. So it's like the idea that you are living in a way that is aligned with what truly matters to you. It's not what people expect of you. It's not what looks good on paper, but it's whatever brings you more aligned to what's meaningful to you.
I love that. My therapist tells me the same, and that's very much how I live my life as a human and as an artist, like completely values based. But at the same time, it can happen. Like it's happened to me in the last couple years a few times where I have felt acute burnout. I'm not going to say long-term burnout, but I have this kind of extreme personality and tendency where like I work and 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 I am enjoying it and I'm grateful for it and I do love what I do, but then there comes a point where suddenly I have a break and then I just stop. Like I just stop everything. And that isn't necessarily to say that I've lost any will or desire to do the thing or any love for the thing that I'm doing. It's just simply I don't have any more mental energy. Like I'm depleted. I'm battery zero. So can you sort of talk about the difference between the burnout that is acute like that where it's just maybe you haven't given yourself the space and the room to recharge on a regular basis versus the kind of burnout that from what I understand that you went through, which was, you know what? I need to pivot in my career path.
Yes. Well, I think chronic burnout is a little bit more sneaky. It sort of builds over time and it can take years to even recognize it. I think chronic burnout it feels like a disconnection. The passion is gone and it's not even that you don't even feel stressed anymore. You just feel sort of empty.
Like apathetic?
Yeah, and this kind of burnout isn't fixed with like a weekend off, you know. I think it requires something deeper. I think acute burnout that what you described, it's like it comes on faster. It's like you've been pushing really hard, you've got a lot of rehearsals, maybe not enough sleep. There's like this endless stream of demands, and then suddenly you like hit a wall, and that's like your body and your mind saying like, "Hey, we have depleted our battery," and your body and your mind just says no more. And that kind of burnout, I think of like a flare up. It's like a fever, whereas chronic burnout is
Okay.
like chronic disease, maybe, you know.
Mm.
So I think acute burn is more intense, but it's easier to recover. Like maybe it means that you just need a weekend off.
So how does one, for young students out there, struggling to sort of find their place not only in society but in the music world, in their own little world, we each have our own little bubbles. What would you say to them about being able to sort of maintain connection with their values and their identity so that they're acting from alignment within themselves and so that they can prevent getting to a place where burnout causes them to change course? There's nothing wrong with changing course at all, but we want to feel like we're in charge of our lives, not that life is passing us by.
Yeah, I'd say that it's important to, of course, let music be part of your identity, a big part of your identity, but don't let it be your whole identity. It's too much. There should never be one thing that takes up your entire identity. I think it's really important to nurture parts of yourself that exists with or without an instrument. Maybe there's a part of someone that like loves cooking or writing or being in nature. I think it's also important to understand that these are not distractions. Just because you need a break and you want to like cook or you want to write or something, this it's not a distraction. It's just making sure that you're occasionally tapping in to the other things that make you you.
But we were taught that they're distractions, at
Yeah,
least in our generation. Do you know what I mean? Like we were taught that I can ask any one of my musician friends, "Do you have a hobby?" And I would say maybe 2% can give me a real answer.
yeah.
And I am not one of those people. Like we're not taught that. I loved when you were talking about sort of going into this biology class and just, how it's completely opened your mind and reignited that spark of curiosity and desire to learn. How did you even get yourself to that place? What was the impetus for even taking that class?
I was always interested in medicine. I remember when I was a little kid and I would get really bored practicing passages. And if my mom wasn't home, then I would turn on the TV and practice in front of the TV.
I think we all did that. I used to read books while
Yeah,
practicing.
yeah. For me, it was watching Animal Planet.
Oh my God, that's really cute.
And yeah, so I would watch Animal Planet and like stand way too close to the TV screen. And I remember there was this show called Animal 911. I don't even think it exists anymore, but it was basically like vet ER stuff where they would get calls or somebody would bring their pet to the hospital and it'd be like, oh, we have to do emergency surgery like now. It was a very exciting show. And so most of the content was vets performing surgery. And for some reason, I really thought it was fascinating. Like, whoa, they're like fixing this dog ate a sock and it's stuck in the intestines. And now they have to cut the intestines open and like take the sock out. This is so fascinating. And so I would like, that was my favorite show. And so I think from a very young age, I was always very interested in medicine. Actually, when I was in medical school, I couldn't decide between surgery and psychiatry. And I loved like the problem solving in surgery. And like it's very, in a way, like more immediate gratification
Mm.
because it's like you got something, you got a problem, and you solve it within the surgery. And so I think for me, I was always drawn to medicine.
What made you choose psychiatry over surgery then?
Well, in a way, they're both very challenging in their own ways. The reason why I decided to go into psychiatry is because, first of all, the longevity of the career. So, just the older you get and the longer you practice in psychiatry, the hope is that you get wiser and wiser. With surgery, it's very much performance, and you very much have to rely on your skills, physical skill sets. And it worried me that, like, I'm already going to medicine a little bit later. I wanted something that had more longevity. And also, I mean, with psychiatry, it's like, gosh, every day I'm learning something. Every day I learn something new about the mind. I feel so privileged to be able to meet like strangers and get to know their story. And I'm always so impressed and always so like honored to just learn about people's resilience. I mean, oftentimes like you find people who have gone through so much trauma and they're still able to sort of, remain on their 2 feet. And it's to me, those stories are really fascinating, and I learn a lot every single day from my patients. That's one of the reasons why I went into psychiatry.
Do you feel like studying psychiatry and going into it as a career, and as you're beautifully describing, being able to meet all these different people in your life and get to hear their stories, and not in an egotistical way, but like be able to play a small role in their life? Do you feel like it's healed you in some way from your own past traumas through with music or burnout or identity crises or anything?
I think for me, it was more the process of like expanding my own identity.
Hmm.
When I reflect back, I don't regret anything. I don't have any regrets. I'm truly so appreciative to my parents. They sacrificed a lot for my musical education, and I have no regrets. I'm very thankful to my mom. I think that as I get older, I have like even more appreciation because I understand, now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, oh, the body doesn't move the same way when you're like a little 10-year-old. And so like for me thinking about like if I had to fly on a red eye every single week,
Oh my
don't think that
gosh,
I could do
no.
that. So I know. So for me, I'm very appreciative to my parents for everything that they've done, and I think that they were also doing the best that they could, and they thought they were doing what was best for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so for me, I'm so grateful that I had the time to explore this other part of life. I still feel very much like a musician. I think one of the hardest things with this transition was when I first started off. I wasn't practicing every day and I wasn't going to practice room every day. And that was very strange. Like I was going to a library.
Hmm.
So it was a very strange experience for me in terms of identity crisis. And a lot of it was like self-doubt. I went into this not thinking, that, that term ignorance is bliss. I think
Yeah.
that truly applied to me because I was like, oh, medical school, how hard can it be? And then I just took it day by day.
But I'm sure like your training in music and not only your literal training as a musician, but all of the psychological training that we have to go through studying an instrument at such a young age so seriously, I'm sure that has informed so much of your own practice in psychiatry and just shaped so much of who you are. Like it makes you so much more of a multifaceted person.
Yeah, I do feel like I have another language. And I think that coming from such a different background and then stepping into medicine, it made me a better doctor. It makes me a better doctor.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't think that I would have done it any other way. I took the long and winding path, but I think this was meant to be. And I'm a better musician because of medicine, and I'm a better doctor because of music.
I love that. I really do. And I completely agree with you about regrets. I have none in my life. I've made so many mistakes, but without those mistakes, I would not have learned. So for me, I only call something a mistake if I haven't learned from it.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you three questions. What would you say has been your biggest mistake in life and therefore your biggest lesson, bearing in mind that neither of us believe in regrets?
There's so many. I have made so many mistakes.
What's the one that feels the most important to you?
Okay, I think one of them is I feel like I've wasted a lot of time not thinking about what was best for me,
Mm.
but instead I feel like I generally one of my flaws is that I tend to be like more like people pleasing. I think part of that comes from childhood, and I think I've wasted a lot of time like not getting to what I needed earlier or soon enough.
And what would you say is your biggest triumph in life so far?
Having the courage to explore other parts of myself,
I love that.
to expand my identity beyond music. Um, I remember when I would first tell, people that I was going into medicine, they would be like, "Oh, so you're giving up?" And I'm like, "No, I hate that term. I'm not giving up anything. I am expanding. I'm adding."
I love that. With these two questions in mind, if you could tell your younger self something from today's perspective through your life's journey and perspective, which of course is also sort of advice for, the younger generation. But if you could tell your younger self something today, what would it be?
I would say always stay curious. Don't be afraid to explore other parts of your identity. And I think that it's important to remind yourself that your worth is not measured on one thing. It's not measured in, your accolades earned or how much applause you get. It's just not. It's a rigged game if you do tie all your self-worth to that. So I think it's important to remind yourself that you're more than just a musician.
I love that. I think about it a lot because there's so much, so much of what we've spoken about, and we've barely scratched the surface, but so much of what we've spoken about today is so much of what I felt growing up. The people pleasing, I mean, that I think we can share, both being girls and studying classical music and being, children of immigrant parents. Like they're just like a three for right there. But just, this idea that we need to be something in order to be worthy. We need to achieve something in order to be worthy. We need to be successful in order to be seen. I wish so much that somebody had told me when I was young, that's not true. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about it now, and with this podcast, bringing people to share their stories and their journeys and their perspectives. Because if we had had that growing up, I wonder how things would have been different. And it's okay. It was part of our journeys, and it's the different generations. And I think the younger generations are honestly a lot more self-aware than we were. There's just a lot more resources that people have today that we didn't have growing up. But at the same time, all of these topics still linger. Especially in the classical music world, we have so much pressure to be a certain way and to be successful by a certain age. And we have to follow this path or that path. And if not, then we're not successful. And if we choose to study another field, then we must not be good enough at our instrument. Absolute BS like that. And so I really admire your courage and your ability to look at yourself at a young age and say, you know what? I want to learn more. Not that I've given up. I want to learn more. I want to expand. I absolutely love that. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing your story. I know we've only scratched the surface, but I'm so glad to have met you. I hope that people will feel seen and heard through your experiences.
Thank you so much, Paula. It's so nice to be here, and I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support. Please share this episode and this podcast, because the more awareness we bring to mental health, the sooner we can break the stigmas around these topics, and the faster we can help make our world a healthier place. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and see you next week for another episode of The Conscious Artist.